All right. So the show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. And we've got our guest today is Nathaneal Cox. He's a photographer whose work is currently on view here at the college as part of the Gordy Fine Arts Gallery. And our thanks go out to Professor Dina Pizzarello, who is the gallery director and is hooking us up with a lot of guests this month who are doing exhibitions. In fact, somebody from last one, we're going to try to get Jetmir on the show, who somehow fell through the cracks as far as an interview guest. But welcome, Mr. Cox. Or you go by Nate?
Nate is good. Nate is good. Thank you for having
Nate is
me.
good. Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for coming on. And I was going to ask you, could you talk a little? I let you pick the music this week. And do you want to talk a little bit about the music you chose, the opener there?
Yeah, sure. So I actually, growing up, used to play in a jazz band. So the intro and outro for this show are, um, I also happen to watch a lot of anime. So they're two, I think it's the endings for two fairly famous anime from back in like the early 2000s. So they have like a jazz feel to it. So it was kind of a nice fusion for me. So I picked it for the show.
Yeah, the stage show is actually quite amazing for the opener as well. I joke because when I talk to people about anime, I watched anime in the '70s, and what anime was in those days was like Kimba the White Lion. It was the one crossover anime thing of my generation.
Yeah, it was different. It's kind of blown up, I guess I want to say, in the past like 5 to 10 years. So it's really interesting because I remember when I went to high school, like you were kind of an outcast. So it's really interesting to see like all the stuff that was considered nerdy when I was growing up. Everyone loves it now between like anime or Marvel or comic books. It's really interesting.
So you were ahead of the curve. Okay, well, I talked a little bit about the format before we started the show, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your background and your studies that's led you to your career in photography. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, so I guess my photography career, I guess, kind of started back when I was in high school as well, to a degree as well. So where I went to school, we actually were lucky enough to have a dark room. So my photography literally started out as taking photo one, photo two, doing like assignments, going in every day into the dark room, developing, and then after high school, I went to engineering school. We also had a dark room there, which I found out while I was there. But when you're doing an engineering degree, you don't necessarily have time to do photography. So it's a little tough to do that when you're handling 6 classes a semester. Plus, I think I had a part time job. So it's kind of, and I was a commuter student. So it was a little crazy, had no time for photography. So I didn't really get back into it until I got an iPhone and started taking pictures, figured out that I kind of liked it again, and it kind of took off from there. I eventually got a digital camera after I went to an Alpha Graphics. I don't know if they're still in business. I don't think they are, but I said, hey, like I really took this picture I like on my phone. Like, how do I print it? And they looked at me and they laughed. It was like, you can't. So that kind of spurred my re-interest into photography and kind of got me back started because I'm pretty inquisitive. I'm very curious. So I kind of started going research like, okay, well, what can I do to print my photos? Oh, you need a digital camera. Great. I don't have a digital camera. What's a good one? How can I go about getting one? And it just kind of went from there. So I didn't get my first DSLR until I want to say the summer of, I want to say 2017. Pretty sure it's 2017 from B&H Photo in this city when a friend was visiting, and just kind of grew from there.
All right, what was the high school, by the way, that you studied at? I'm
Summit
interested.
High School in Summit, New
I'm in-
Jersey.
Oh, I was going to say it's here in New York. We're always looking to reach out to high schools that have photo programs. So that Jersey may be a bridge too far for us.
Maybe a little bit, but I would be curious to see like what photo looks like for high schools now because I think everything is digital nowadays. So I
Right.
know darkroom has kind of been like become like the kind of hipster thing to do. So I know there's a couple dark rooms out in Brooklyn that I haven't had a chance to check out yet. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how things have kind of flip flopped.
And what was your first DSLR? And for the folks who don't know, for the folks who whatever we want to call it, the Earthlings who are not photo geeks, DSLR is literally digital single lens reflex, which means it's a a camera that has one lens with the mirroring system so that the photographer can see what the picture frame is going to look like and the focus before they take the picture.
Yep.
Yeah. So what'd you buy?
I got a Nikon D7100.
All
Yeah.
right.
And
Why'd you choose Nikon? Because did you have Nikon analog cameras when you were younger?
yeah, so the camera that I borrowed to do my photo classes in high school was a Nikon. I don't remember the specific model, but I remember I borrowed it from my uncle, and it was a Nikon. So that was the only real brand that I knew. And actually, no, I lied. My first technical digital camera, I think, was like a Nikon Coolpix, like way back in the day when those were super
Right.
popular. And then when I think I just used it too much and it just broke, so I stopped using it. But when I started like taking it a little more seriously, that's when I got the D7100.
Right.
So I
And
guess
I think folks, again, when we talk about this seriousness, because I think I think that people are using their phones now who think of themselves seriously. And I actually have a friend who is used to be an editorial photographer. Now she's a videographer. She does everything on her phone. But as photographers, I guess when we say serious, we're talking about uh, file size, right? You wanted a bigger file, like a better quality, or like a raw file.
yeah. And I think when it comes to printing, I think some of the newer iPhones, I think they used to make them in JPEGs, but I think they have like their own HEIC file format now.
Really?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's a little frustrating. So when I'm working with pictures, I want to airdrop them from my iPhone to my Mac. It'll be like HEIC, so I always have to be sitting there like converting the JPEG. It's kind of a pain in the neck, but yeah, for file size, and I think for the DPI purposes, I think they traditionally shot at 72 DPI. I don't know what they do now because I'm a bit old school. I still have like an iPhone 8 Plus, like something super, super old.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I'm a little bit picky. But
I
yes,
had an old 8 that I traded it in for a 13, but I'm told the 14 now has some sort of really super phone, like the resolution is incredible.
yeah, the resolution game has gotten really crazy when it comes to phones, especially since I started adding in different lenses. So you have the lenses for specific purposes. So you can zoom, you have a wide angle. And it's really interesting. And I used to kind of look down on it a little bit up until think about last year. I had taken a trip to Greenland. Shout out Laid Back Company. And the first night we went out, and we started our journey in Greenland, we saw the Northern Lights. So I was trying to sit there and get a shot on my DSLR, and I just couldn't because you have a boat that's rocking back and forth. You're
Right.
trying to like figure out camera settings. Generally speaking, like you want like a longer exposure a little bit so you can capture the lights better. And then one of my friends on the boat, I think she had like one of the later Galaxies S70 whatever that they currently have, and her shot was stunning. And I was like, okay, you know what? The cameras, the cameras on the phones are actually kind of nice now.
Yeah,
So
one of the things you were talking about zooming and stuff. In the old days, what the way that they did the zooming was it was digital zooming where they
yeah.
literally make the picture smaller
Hmm.
and just all you saw was a smaller section of the picture. But now it's actually optical because I took a picture of my wife off of like I have a second story landing or a third story landing and she was down low and used the whatever it is 3x on the 13 and it was came out pretty good. I mean, it didn't have a lot of resolution problems. We're really, by the way, we're really going deep into photography. Hopefully, people can keep up with us. But I want to talk about you get the DSLR, and because you say you want to get serious about photography, so you want to talk about the kind of pictures you've been making or taking since 2017, and that's led you to what people are gonna see if they pass your work in the halls.
Yeah. So to continue on that journey a little bit. So when you're going from, I guess, uh, moving to like a nice digital camera, like I said, when I was learning, I was doing my research, but I didn't fully know how to really take full advantage of like the camera's capabilities in terms of exposure and like figuring out the exposure triangle for the photo nerds who know what that is. So a lot of what I was doing originally was taking a picture, getting it to focus, making sure I had auto ISO off because that's the bane of most people's existence. And whatever I could figure out, I would take the shot. If it was good, great. If it wasn't, or I was close to it, cool. Just throw it in Photoshop, fix it. So I didn't fully know how to properly and expose a shot in camera. So it wasn't until I went to Japan and did an Airbnb experience with a guy named Martin in Tokyo, where we were learning long exposure photography at night. And it wasn't until then it was like, okay, well, clearly I'm missing some skills. So he kind of taught me the basics of uh, a little bit more about my camera, basic photography exposure with the exposure triangle, and some Lightroom. And then I got a lot better almost immediately because I knew I was more intentional with the types of photos that I was taking and what I wanted to do. And then from there, I've just been constant learning and going to seminars, going to classes, going to different things to kind of learn more about photography and get better.
Yeah, for again, folks watching don't know never heard of the phrase exposure triangle. Interesting that I don't think I ever had heard of talked about it as a phrase, and I've been teaching photography for 30 years, but and, as a photographer for more for even longer. It's going to be 85. What does that mean? It'll be like will it be 40 years in 2025? I guess longer. Anyhow, that's where it's the shutter speed and aperture in combination with whatever you're, in the case now with digital cameras, what they're rating the film speed as, what we call ISO, ASA, which of course with digital cameras is infinite. You can change it, picture to picture, even if you'd wanted to. But of course, every time you pick a particular film speed, there are things like the higher speeds. Well, even I don't even know in digital. What is it? Noise, right? What noise is the issue at the high speeds, right? And then
and it's called ISO. It's light sensitivity, really.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
the lower
kind of like
it's just light sensitivity.
yeah. So it's kind of like how grainy your photo. So your photo
Right,
photo
exactly.
gets. So if you have one of the older iPhones and you attempt to take a picture at night and you see that it's like super grainy, that graininess means that you have like a really high ISO settings. But even like your camera sensor size determines like how much you can get away with or how sensitive it is to light. Because if you use a smaller sensor, more of that noise, the graininess will show up on your photo, depending on what setting you have it as. But on a larger sensor, that same ISO setting, it won't be as noticeable. So
Yeah, better cameras, in fact.
yeah.
The camera, the less noise. Now they're kind of conquering all of this stuff. So, but let's talk a little bit about subject matter. So, what do you choose to? What's your main? I mean, I walked quickly down and I noticed there were like landscapes going on. So, is that your particular focus?
Yeah, so I usually tend to do landscapes and cityscapes. I like to travel a lot, so kind of merged both hobbies together between the photography and the travel. Um, it was I kind of just started bringing my camera with me everywhere. Brought my tripod, got a newer tripod that's like super small, pretty sturdy, fits in my carry-on luggage pretty easily, and that tends to be most of my subject matter. I will say I have been experimenting more with abstract photography as of late, and even that definition has been really hard for me to like define, if that makes sense. Because I've seen abstract architectural photography, which has been pretty interesting. A lot of my focus for abstract photo, what I've been experimenting has more been plant life and like macro photography, and trying to figure out how I can um, kind of choose like an abstract view or kind of give you the sense of, hey, what is it that I'm looking at? Um, so that's kind of been my subject matter, but my quote unquote bread and butter has been like cityscapes and landscapes. It's really, I usually tend to shoot around sunset just because I'm horrible at getting up early. So I don't really do too many sunrise photos. But yeah, a lot of that has been the subject matter that I've shot over the past like 4 or 5 years.
So you were talking about your photography as a hobby, but you also used the phrase bread and butter. So how does photography for you? What are you? Is this something you're making a living on, or part of your living on of it, or you just do this for love?
I think it's, I guess, for the love of the game, I guess. My day job is I'm actually a software engineer. So I graduated from with a degree in electrical engineering and moved into the software field. But I do photography on the side. So that is kind of like, if in an ideal world, if I had a choice between, like, if you had made the same amount of money doing photography and doing software engineering, I'd probably pick photography. It's more interesting at times, and I do love to explore and go out and see like different places. And I do like to try to uh, get shots that nobody else has, or people have a certain subject that's been shot or quote unquote done to death. Like, you do want to see if you can explore and do it a different way that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I talk to my students about how a photographer supports themselves or makes a living, we talk about the four ways that Walker Evans. I don't know if you know the work of Walker Evans. He's a photographer from the 20s and 30s. Kept middle of the 20th century. Anyhow, he used to say there's four ways. One is obviously by consignment, where somebody tells you pictures like they need like even like wedding photography qualifies as something like that, but editorial. Then there is on spec, the artist who makes a work of art and then sells it. The third is, he would say, as a hobby, where you make the majority of your income some other way, and support yourself. But the last one was being rich.
Honestly, yeah,
And which,
yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, that's probably the best way. Or my professor in grad school said marrying rich was one of the ways to do it. So as far as he was concerned, every one of them was as valid as the other, because he did all of those things. Time, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But anyhow, let's talk. I wanted to mention. So how did Dina find you, or how did you find Dina? How did you end up in the LaGuardia Art Gallery?
Yeah. So like you said, I guess I'm kind of in a mix between stage two and stage three, whereby like I do take photography, I do have my prints, I do sell them, but I also do have a day job as well. So last year at I think it was the Red Dot show during Art Basel Miami week, I had my work on display, and I think I had just missed Dina and got an email from the gallery saying like, "Hey, someone came by, left a card." So I was like, "Great." Let me get back to them after the show, finish the show, sent an email. I think Dina was a bit under the weather at the time, so it took a bit for us to connect. But when we finally connected, it was like, hey, she's like, I really love your work. I'd love to show it at the LaGuardia Gallery. So I said, great. Which pieces do you want? And she looked at the list. I was like, okay, give me all of these pieces. So I said, great. And then from there was just kind of the prep work of making sure I had all my I's dotted and T's crossed to make sure like I had all the pieces here, because this year has been fairly busy for me, just because I've been doing a lot of the larger shows since like January. So I had Superfine, I had the Affordable Art Fair in New York City, did Art Expo New York. So it's been kind of crazy and hectic, just coordinated between those shows and make sure I had all the pieces available for the LaGuardia show, or to figure out which ones I need to get printed. So that is the story of how we kind of met and coordinated the show.
What's hilarious is I grew up in South Florida, but I've never been to Art Basel. I left 30 years ago, and that's when it started happening.
Go
So
figure.
it's quite a scene, right? I'm told.
Honestly, I feel like you only really need to go once. And I mean, no disrespect to the show of Art Battles Miami, it is fantastic, but I feel like you will see more pieces that I think you will resonate with at some of the more satellite shows. So I typically do Red Dot every year with Perseus Gallery. Thank you to them because they're awesome. Um, but some of the other shows, like I've been to Nada, Nada's been super cool. I've been to Scope. Scope has been really interesting as well too. So I feel like gigantic, like super famous, super well known galleries go to Art Basel, and then you have maybe artists who are, I don't want to say less established, maybe a little less well known, but are maybe a little bit more independent that you'll see at some of the other satellite shows. And I honestly feel like it's almost a little bit better that way because you're, I don't want to say more guaranteed, but you're more likely to be able to see the artists and talk to them and talk about their work and like see more interesting things and more interesting processes than like the super big name things. So Art Basel is great. I think everyone should definitely go see it once. But I do like the smaller shows a bit better because it is a bit more. It can, depending on the show, it can be a bit more intimate, and you will meet like fairly cool artists while they're there.
You know the satellite show Untitled, that
I've
group?
heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because a friend of mine is, I guess, one of the curators of it, and put that together. It's always a big thing. We're going to go to a station break in a few minutes, but I wanted to talk a minute about your exhibition style. I noticed that you print on, what is it? You on glass, or is it like the reverse of glass? How,
Acrylic.
acrylic.
Yeah, so I don't see that style too often, so I kind of like it a little bit. But yeah, so what they do is they kind of merge. They print on photo paper and they merge. They sandwich that photo paper between two pieces of acrylic, and then they put a frame on the back. So I have experimented with like almost. I won't say almost. I'll say metal and canvas. I've experimented with both those styles, but I've kind of settled on acrylic just because I like the presentation best.
It's got to be a little pricey, though, right?
It is. It is. So clearly I don't print every day, but when I do sell something, I do print it. Sometimes it is tricky because you do want to like print a small one to see like what it comes out as, but or how it looks, but sometimes you do have to go with God a little bit and hope that it comes out all right. I have had one print that I did where I thought it would be good, it looked great on my screen, and printed it, didn't come out the way I wanted it to. So sometimes a little bit touch and go.
Yeah, I printed on canvas because I do these kind of large merge things, and I've seen people printing on metal, which is good. What's the? Do they give you an archival rating for that? Like, how long do they expect the print to survive in the acrylic?
Um, I think they give you. I think it's a silver print that they do, and it's usually like an archival style that they do. So it usually is supposed to last a pretty long time.
500 years. I mean, that's originally what Kodak, back in my day, back in the 60s, 80s, they were telling us that a silver print, if you properly processed and stored, would last 500 years. But
Wow.
believe it or not, but of course that's all it's all through testing. Anyhow, it's 1:29. I just want to take a quick station break. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and today my guest is Nathaneal Cox, who's a photographer, and his work is currently on view at the college as part of the LaGuardia Fine Arts Gallery. And we always give our thanks to Professor Dina Pizzarello, who is the gallery director and has brought Nate to us. So Chris Pope, my engineer, he's got your website, and he's going to try to get it up on this screen here. He's smiling here because I always do this to him, where I ask him to try to do the impossible on here. We're on Skype, we're streaming. He's got his thumbs up, and I guess he said, "Oh, I'm looking at it. I don't see it on our screen, but I see it on the Twitch screen." So can you see it though, Nathaneal? Can you?
Do I have Twitch up?
I'll tell you what I'm looking at. So it says Nate at photos. It says shop art, and then it's got 3 landscapes. One of them, I think, is actually, I saw this one. Oh, now he's got it. Oh, he's got it here for us now. And I guess we could talk about which ones are in the show and which ones are. But I think the one on the far left, Dina used that for the poster, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And you got it listed as bestsellers. So
Um,
how do we
yeah.
negotiate? You tell us how to negotiate the website so we can look at some of the stuff that you've got up currently now. Okay.
So there's no good way to see everything at once. You can kind of
Okay.
click through. So it's kind of split up. I divided it by like sections of the globe. So there's like the quote unquote bestsellers, which I think the ones that people either tend to resonate with the most or like the best. You've got landscapes or cityscapes. Just as actually, you could probably switch between landscapes and cityscapes. It's probably the easiest way to do it. And then the Americas, Europe, and Asia, because those are the primary places that I've been. And then prints are smaller matter prints that I just started this year, which I haven't fully announced yet, but I guess this is the announcement. I have one up. I have a couple more that I've have physically printed. I just haven't come up with names for them, so that's the only reason why they're not on the website yet.
Well, so Chris, why don't you take us to landscapes? But when you say landscapes, you're doing like the classic, history of photography kind of landscapes. You're doing like serious, like Ansel Adams landscape stuff, right? I mean, that on the map is it. You have to tell us which ones are in the show. So again, I said cotton candy. That's the poster, right?
Yeah, that is a poster. I think almost all of these are in the show, minus like one cityscape.
Good.
But that was mostly because I
Can you make
trying
it?
to figure out
Can you,
if I want to re-edit it or
if you click on
not.
it, does it get bigger?
Yeah, if you click on it, it'll take you to the actual page. It should be a little better. The website's pretty cool because they will give you like an AR view if you have like your phone against the wall, see what it would look like. But yeah.
AR view. What's that?
So it's augmented reality. So if you were to view the website from like your phone, it would kind of show you what it like looks like on your wall. But yeah,
Okay.
this is
You'd hold your phone up, and the camera on your phone would allow you to see where it's viewed. Well, this is quite beautiful. Where are we where are we when we're looking here in this picture?
So this shot I took back in 2019. It's of the Andes mountains in Argentina. So I want to say this is like a couple hours south of Mendoza, that province.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one was interesting because this specific cutout, I had while we were going south to the Andes, we actually came by this little passing, and I had gotten out, and it was the middle of the day, so the sun wasn't the greatest. Wasn't really that pretty, but the water, as you can see, it's very still here. It's just as still early or in the day. And then coming back, I happened to get really, really lucky. We had like a really, really nice blue hour. So you're driving through the mountains and the entire sky is lit up with like the most beautiful pink light that you could possibly imagine. And part of one of my issues is trying to figure out the balance between when do you want to stop and shoot a photo or when do you want to just like enjoy the moment. And I think one of the issues with our current generations, I think we're a little too focused on like recording the moment instead of actually just enjoying it. So even if you go to like concerts, you'll see people with their phones out recording. Now obviously they're probably enjoying the concert, but it's very different from back in the day before cameras where it's like no, like people are out there with their lighters and just like being in the moment. So this was one of those times where I was kind of trying to be in the moment as much as possible and just look at the different the kind of the differences between uh, the blue hour light and the landscape that I had previously like passed going and now returning being like okay well this is how it looks this is how it's different it's beautiful and then we actually came out to this clearing and I actually wanted to stop a couple times before but I was like you know what let's just enjoy the view as we're going back and then I eventually got out and took this shot so that's how that came about.
Yeah. Let's see another one, Chris. How does he move through? Okay. Actually, oh no, is that Mountain Peak one available for was that in the show?
Yeah. Yes, that one's in the show.
Make it bigger.
I think when you should be on your left-hand side when you're coming from the elevator. But yeah, so this one I took, I think I mentioned that I took a trip to Greenland last year. And while we were on the boat, this was one of the moodier days to a degree because some days were a little bit cloudier than others. But took, I have, when I travel, I really carry like two lenses and a teleconverter. So I think for this one, I think I was using my teleconverter with my 7200 and I took a shot of the top of one of the mountains because we're basically traveling like through the fjords in Greenland. So you were off the coast of like landmass, so you could see a lot of the tops of the mountains. So that is um, one of the shots that I got while I was out there.
So with your teleconverter and the camera, what's the length of the lens here we're talking about?
So, for those who don't know what a teleconverter is, it essentially doubles the focal length. So if it's 70 to 200, it doubles it from 140 to
Oh, I
400.
thought you said 7200. So it's a 70. So this might have been at 400
Possibly, possibly. I don't fully remember what focal length it was at. I have to look at Lightroom again, but yeah, it was something along those lines.
All right. Let's see another one, Chris. Beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
Wish there was an easier way to go through these, like slideshow, but it's okay. Let's. I want to take a look at, because the one, Chris, do the one of the in the desert with the water. This is actually a very famous Horseshoe Canyon, right?
Yeah, it is.
So what? You had your thing on there. Yeah, you had it right. Okay.
Yeah, so for this specific shot, it's actually three different shots that I photo merged together in Lightroom. So
Wow.
you can kind of see like the wispiness of the sky, and that's kind of due to the photo merge. So I was out shooting at sunset like I usually do. And one of the issues that I was noticing is because of the sun, I was getting a couple of different exposure readings for like the sky and the foreground. So I figured, let me take all three and put them together and see what happens. And it happened to be reasonably windy that day as well, which is why you can see like the kind of like slow shutter movement in the sky. So that's kind of how I decided I wanted how I wanted to like put everything together. So I took all three of the shots, third in photo merge and Lightroom, and I got something that I liked, and then just lightly edited on kind of enhance the pieces that I wanted to enhance.
Here's a question for you. So your camera, I'm guessing, does it have an HDR setting?
I believe it does have an HDR setting in it, but I don't always use it.
Yeah, because this is like a self HDR.
Yeah, basically.
What is the R? So high definition resolution or something? What is it? What is H?
I forget what the R is for. I do not remember.
Whatever. But
yeah,
so it's kind of interesting that you did your own HDR. It's beautiful. Again.
Yeah, if you don't do it that way, I know my camera has like the bracketing setting, which is essentially for those people who don't know what bracketing is, when you're doing an exposure, you can do it the right way or not the right way based on like your camera meter. It'll tell you like, hey, you're perfectly exposed. And what bracketing does is it overexposes it and then it underexposes it. So you have like three different images, and then you have ranges that you can play with when you're editing.
Yeah, and when I talk to my students about it, it's basically you can pick the best exposure, and if it's not an action shot, you're fine. The problem with action shots is that if somebody moves, it's like having three different pictures. But with the landscape, as long as you get it quickly, you can. Then again, you can choose. But HDR even takes it to this next level where you can take the best of the sky and let's say and the best of the shadow and the best of the middle tones and put them all together. What's interesting though is if you'd been HDR, you would have not gotten the movement in the sky.
No, you wouldn't have.
It takes the picture all at once. All three shots are done digitally simultaneously.
But again, I feel like it's also one of those things that kind of lets you kind of see the creativity of photography. So like you said, if you had done it straight HDR style, sure, you don't get the wispiness. And I think I recently went to a talk the other day and I found out that I think they have special filters and filter holders that you can put onto your camera lens so that you can, I think it's like a graduated filter, so you can specifically darken specifically parts of the sky if it's too overexposed and compared to the foreground. And you can almost, for lack of a term, you can really do everything in camera if you really so choose, which is pretty awesome. But then again, like if you do it that way, you don't get the sky that comes out this way. So it's really interesting how from a creative perspective, like everything is super creative, but you do have trade-offs that you do have to make here and there, depending on like what you're trying to do. So that's one of the things that's always kind of like interested me in photography is like there's many ways to do things. There's many ways to get a quote unquote correct exposure, but every photo won't necessarily look the same, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, I like to do as much in camera as I can because I hate making all those decisions back
Me
at
too.
the dark room.
Me too. I personally don't like to spend longer than a half an hour at the very worst, like editing photos. I don't.
Okay, Chris, take us out again. Let's see if we can see one. We got maybe about 4 minutes. We could take a look at it. Is there any particular picture you wanted to talk about with the iceberg, maybe?
We could talk about the iceberg. That's another one from Greenland that I liked a bit. So when you go to Greenland, you are depending on the time of year, I want to say, like you're basically in the Arctic, so you kind of are surrounded by icebergs. So it's really cool because when you're here in civilization, you almost are overstimulated. Your phone going off every 2 seconds because someone's posting something in some group chat that you probably need to look at later, or you've got 20 emails that just came in. So it's really interesting when you're out there how calm and peaceful it is. And depending on how high up you go, like you don't really see like animals either. I remember like some of the water is so still that when you actually look into it, it doesn't seem like a deep blue dark abyss like when you look in other parts of the globe in the Atlantic Ocean. So it's very, very interesting. And because it's so clear, I know everyone always says like, oh, like the top of the iceberg is the tip of the iceberg. Like there's so much more beneath it. It's actually a thing. Like you can see into the water and see like the ice mass beneath the quote unquote tip that you see on the that protrudes from the water. So it's a very interesting and surreal environment, and I'd love to go again. I just need to save up a bit for it, but definitely on my bucket list. And so this is one of the icebergs. I think one third or fourth day in when we were sailing around. So I think we kind of did a pass around it. So I do have another shot that I'm working on of the other side of this iceberg. So be on the lookout for that.
Here's a question for you. So I noticed that the sky goes from a kind of a magenta on the right or blue to a kind of a deep cyan blue on the left. Was that you doing anything, or is that just the way it is?
I think it's half and half. I did enhance the color a little bit, but we were also around sunset when I shot that photo. So some of the colors were there, they just weren't necessarily as strong, if that makes sense. So even like the yellows you can see in the background, that's part of the sun setting.
Yeah. How I saw the side the prints you did for the show. What I don't know, were they 1620 or bigger?
I think they're 24 by 36. I think there's a couple that are okay. There's three. I think one is 20 by 30. Most of them are 24 by 36, and there's one that's 16 by 24, which is the I think the desert snowflakes one.
And would you want to make these even bigger, or is that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Someone actually recently asked me for the largest that I could do, and that is I think it's 48 by 72. I want to say something like that.
and that's because of the limitations of the acrylic format, right?
Yeah, yeah. I looked, and technically you can get it printed larger if you wanted, but you would literally have to go to like a specialist to do it that way. So for my editions, it's usually a total of like 80 that get printed. Usually it's about 30 of 24 by 36, 30 of like the 20 by 30, and then I leave 20 for like the larger pieces for people who want that large. Usually for like buildings or businesses or things of that nature, because most people just don't have the wall space for something that gigantic.
All right. Well, okay, so we're into the last quarter hour, and I wanted to just see. No, there's no message. So we can leave the website now, Chris, if you want. We can just talk some more. I was going to say that. So you've done a lot of this work. What are your plans for the future? What kind of? I mean, you already said you want to go back to Greenland. So is
Yeah, I think part of the way that I look at how I choose or want to travel, like there's a couple places I'd love to visit, but are probably unrealistic. Like I would love to visit Venezuela. One of my fairly good friends, shout out Rosa, I think she just went back to go visit her family. And I feel like I kind of want to go to places that people don't visit often or go see things that aren't plastered all over social media. So social media, I think, has been pretty good for like inspiration of places I want to be. So I've seen some pretty cool places in China. I'd love to go to countries that have, like they have the desert, but also have like pieces of ice, have mountains, but also have like forest that are, I guess it's kind of like the States to a degree, but different parts of the globe, just so you can see how other people live. So Oman, I would love to go there to take some desert photography. Or I know Argentina I was looking at. I think at the tip they have some pretty cool national parks down there that look really interesting. And I definitely, Africa is definitely high, high, high on my list, just because I feel like you don't really see a ton of photography that comes out of there that isn't like um, that doesn't have anything to do with like the animals over there, like National Geographic type shots. So I love to go over there and like check out those natural landscapes. So I think those are probably like the biggest wants on my list that I would love to go check out.
So for you, it's about finding places that nobody else has seen, or that aren't, like you said, on in the whatever you want to call it, the social media zeitgeist of the time.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like there are like case in point, like I think the other day I think they found like what 3,000 plus islands off the coast of Japan that nobody knew about. So it's kind of cool to know that like even though we have a ton of knowledge about our planet, there's still a ton of stuff that we haven't seen yet. So it's kind of cool to go out and explore and go see like, hey, can you find anything interesting? And even possibly go revisit places that I've been before and see if you can maybe not necessarily redo a shot, but see if there's something different that you can create from stuff that's been there already. So it's nice that like people want to go to Europe and people want to go to like Japan or China, but I feel like it is also like if you can do it safely, it is also good to like go to other places that don't get as much love, if that makes sense.
But for you, I think also is it about taking a photograph of something that visually can be striking? Is that is that part of it for you as well? I mean,
I think I want to say like two-thirds of it is travel, and the other third is trying to see if you can take something really interesting. I don't really have a I guess quote unquote algorithm that says, hey, this is what I do to take like the quote unquote perfect shot. For me, it's kind of like if I get that wow feeling, then that's how I know it's like, okay, this is the shot that you want to take. Or you see something or a beautiful view, it's like, okay, this is something I want to take. So it's really just kind of exploring and kind of going with the flow a little bit. Even for like my shooting style, I want to say like 65% of the shots that I take are just aren't planned. You just happen to be there. You're exploring and you find something that you really like. And the other 35% is, hey, like kind of scouted around, scoped it out a little bit. And either you want to come back at the time that you know you like to shoot, or you just want to come back. And if you have to do the traditional, hey, you want to sit here until the light hits something just the right way and then you want to take the shot, then that's how you take it. But I want to say, like I said, like two-thirds of my photos are just like you just had to be there type of deal.
right. Uh, you got any exhibitions coming up? What's going on in that area? I mean,
Oh man, yeah, I've been super busy this year. I have the other art fair coming up in Brooklyn that is May 18th to the 21st. If you want tickets, shoot me a DM. I will do my best to help you out.
what's the
I
show?
ha-
It's the Brooklyn
the other art fair.
or
So
the
I
other
think
art,
every year, I think it's like a Freeze Art Week. I want to say.
right?
So there's a couple. I know there's a Clio Art Fair. I think Freeze might even be going around that time as well too. So there's a bunch going on. But for me specifically, May 18th to the 21st, I will be. I think it's at the Brooklyn Shipyard. I'll be at the other art fair. I've got another solo show coming up in Jersey City. The opening for that is June 2nd, and then I will be taking a break for a little bit from doing in-person shows just kind of want to relax, explore a little bit, kind of go through my backlog, which doesn't ever seem to shrink at all. I just keep going places and shooting. You're like, oh, remember that thing you did like last year? Did you ever finish editing that? No. Okay, well, you might want to actually look at that. So there's a couple things that I'm still editing that I will be adding to my website, either from a print perspective, like the small matted prints, or the traditional sizes that I usually do in the traditional acrylic medium. So just keep checking back with me. I'll be posting a bunch on Instagram. I'll have a bunch of stuff to come on our website as well too. So just gotta stay tuned.
Yeah. Uh, what I find really fascinating, exciting about you is your success and the fact that you've totally done this. I want to use the term amateur, which is not. I don't use that derogatory. Amateur for me is like people who do things for love, as opposed to whatever else they do, money. But that you didn't go, because I get a lot of students that ask me the question, do I really have to go to school to be a photographer? And I'm straight with them, and I say, no, you don't. But there are other reasons why people go to school. Whether it's the networking and you've certainly learned, but some people like a structured environment. But it's kind of exciting, the fact of how successful you are, and the fact that again, I mean, I guess you take it in high school, but that was the only, and working with those folks in Japan is about as close as you come to any kind of standard education experience with this photography. But you've had quite a. Do you chalk it up? What do you chalk it up to?
I have the philosophy that anything that isn't like a physical ability that can be learned. So even like doctors and lawyers, like they were all like pre-law or pre-med students at one point. So I very much believe that if you put your mind to it and you go seek out the knowledge, like I think anyone who was born post like 1990, call that like the cusp, you're basically part of one of the most privileged um generations of all time, because anything that you could possibly want is online. If you want knowledge, is there. You just have to go look for it. So I feel like it's one of those things where like you use the internet for knowledge, you find a mentor for wisdom. So you have people that you can ask questions to kind of help speed up your process, I guess, and that's kind of how I've done it. A lot of it has been trial by fire. A lot of things I've learned, but I've also like just keep quote unquote getting educated. And even if you feel like you know something, like I'm not above taking a beginner class and saying like, hey, let's learn something new, or like learn a new perspective, because you can always learn something new.
We got about a minute left. Any thank yous or last minute words you want to say?
Yeah. Thank you to the official show opening for the LaGuardia show is this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Please come out. I believe there's an RSVP link. You might be able to just show up, but please definitely come out, check out the show. Again, I have the other art fair May 18th to 21st. Please come check that out too. Thank you to Dina for giving me my first solo show, because this is the first one that I've ever done. And thank you to all the friends who have consistently come out and checked out my work, and um, say thank you for all the lessons that I've learned as well along the way. And those have kind of propelled me forward and kind of let me consistently do what I love to do. So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being on our show. And we've been watching what's going on. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. Our guest today has been Nathaneal Cox, a photographer whose work is currently on view here at the college as part of the LaGuardia Fine Arts Gallery. We also want to give our special thanks to Professor Dina Pizzarello, gallery director, who brought Nate to our attention and for the show, and is a special friend of the show. And we're going to go out with some music again. So tell us a little bit about what we're going to see for the outgoing music. It's that.
I think it's Shikinuta. It's another very
Colorful.
jazzy song that I like, just because I used to play jazz back in the day. So
Yeah, it's got a little Latino flair in it, so that works for me too.
Yeah, I think this is a cover of the original song. But if you get a chance to go check it out, I think it's called The Real Folk Blues.
Right.
Definitely like a really good song. I would say listen to it on YouTube.
All right. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And Mr. Pope, thank you for all your work behind the scenes. And please take us out.